Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are pivoting. Usually we're looking at something like, the future of AI or the collapse of supply chains or maybe the history of a specific economic theory.
Right, the hard data stuff.
Exactly. But today, we're going to get into something that feels, well, a little spooky, maybe a little unsettling.
It is a departure, definitely.
Yeah.
But when you look at the stack of research we have, it fits our mandate perfectly.
It really does.
We aren't here to tell ghost stories just for the sake of a jump scare. We are here to look at architecture. We are looking at history. And I think most importantly, we are looking at psychology.
Exactly. We are taking a journey to three of the most notorious locations on the planet. I mean, we're talking about places that are synonymous with mystery, tragedy, and the paranormal.
Right.
But the mission today is to peel back those layers of urban legend. We really want to find the structural truths underneath it all.
We call it psychogeography, how a place makes you feel, and how the history of a place, the stories you've been told, changes the way you look at a wall or a door or a long, dark hallway.
And we have a serious stack of sources to help us do that. We have Echoes of the Past, the RMS Queen Mary from the Museo del Mar. We have a fantastic investigative piece from SF Gate with, I think, the best title ever. Everything you think you know about the Winchester Mystery House probably isn't true.
It's a great title. It lays it all out. We've also got a summary of Jake Anderson's book, Gone at Midnight, which dives deep into the Elisa Lam case at the Cecil Hotel.
Such a tragic case.
It is. And to round it out, we have architectural analysis from Kuham on the Winchester floor plans, which is fascinating. And to keep us grounded in the modern discourse, we've pulled some very heated Reddit. The common thread here is the container. All three of these stories are about how physical spaces, ships, houses, hotels become sort of batteries for our collective fears.
That's a great way to put it, a battery. So let's start with the heavyweight. The RMS Queen Mary.
The Queen of the Seas.
If you go to Long Beach, California today, it's a hotel. You can have a nice dinner, maybe take a haunted tour. But looking at the Museo del Mar source, the history of this vessel it's heavy. It was not built to be a tourist attraction.
No, absolutely not. To understand the Queen Mary, you have to go back to the golden age of transatlantic travel. Construction began in Scotland at the John Brown and Company shipyard in 1930.
1930.
And context is key here. This is right at the start of the Great Depression.
So just terrible timing.
The worst timing. Construction actually halted completely between 1931 and 1934 because the funding just dried up.
So it just sat there.
It sat there as a rusting skeleton on the River Clyde. For years, it was a symbol of economic failure before it was ever a symbol of luxury. But when it finally launched in 1934 and made its maiden voyage in May 1936, it was a technological marvel, an absolute giant.
And the amenities listed here are just mind-blowing for the 1930s. 2 swimming pools on a ship.
2? Yes. Strictly separated by class, naturally. First class and tourist class did not mix their water.
Of course. It also had a gymnasium, a full hospital, a library, a grand ballroom. It was a floating city.
It truly was.
And the passenger list reads like a history book.
Yeah.
Winston Churchill, the Duke and Duchess of Windsor.
Audrey Hepburn, Clark Gable, Fred Astaire, Bob Hope, Elizabeth Taylor.
Imagine walking into that grand salon in 1937 and seeing Fred Astaire having a drink. It just paints a picture of absolute glamour. It was the only way to travel if you were anyone who mattered.
And that glamour is so important because it creates a contrast. The ghost stories, they rely on the fall from grace. Because it didn't stay a luxury liner for very long. September 1939 rolls around, World War II begins, and the Queen Mary undergoes a radical, and I mean radical, transformation.
This is where it earns the nickname, the Gray Ghost.
Literally. They painted the entire ship funnel's hull superstructure a specific shade of navy gray designed to camouflage it against the horizon line and the ocean.
So all that beautiful paint, just gone.
Gone. They stripped out the Art Deco furniture, the tapestries, the luxury fittings. They covered the beautiful wood paneling with plywood, and they refitted it to be a troop ship.
The capacity numbers are staggering. As a luxury liner, it held what, maybe 2,000 passengers?
About that, yeah. Plus around 1,200 crew.
And as a troop ship?
Over 15,000 troops. Plus crew. On a single voyage.
That is claustrophobic just to think about. I mean, where do they all sleep?
They installed what were called standee bunks. They were stacked 6 high. The men would sleep in shifts. So one guy gets out of the bunk and another guy, still warm from the last person, gets in. for weeks at a time.
Unbelievable.
It was hot, it smelled of sweat and diesel, and it was dangerous. But the Queen Mary had one defense, one major advantage.
Speed.
Speed, it could hit 32.5 knots, that's about 37 miles per hour.
Which, for a hunk of steel that big, is just flying.
It's terrifyingly fast. Crucially, as you said, it was faster than the German U-boat torpedoes. The strategy was simple. Run fast, zigzag constantly, and never, ever stop.
But that policy, don't stop.
Yeah.
That is what leads us to the inciting incident for the ship's darkest reputation.
Yes. If you were looking for the curse of the Queen Mary, you find it on October 10, 1942. The ship is approaching the coast of Ireland. It's carrying over 10,000 American GIs.
And it has an escort ship, a light cruiser called the HMS Curacoa.
Correct.
Now, paint the picture of the size difference here.
It's almost comical if it weren't so tragic. The Queen Mary is over 80,000 tons. The Curacoa is about 4,000 tons.
So the liner is 20 times larger than its escort.
It's like a whale being escorted by a dolphin. They are both zigzagging to avoid submarine targeting, which is standard procedure.
But they get the timing wrong.
They get it catastrophically wrong. It's a combination of miscommunication and, well, physics. As the Queen Mary overtakes the Curacoa, the hydrodynamics take over. It's called the Venturi effect.
A suction force.
Exactly. The massive displacement of the Queen Mary creates this powerful suction. It literally pulled the smaller ship into its path.
And at 32 knots.
There's no time to react. The Queen Mary's bow is reinforced steel designed to smash through North Atlantic storms. It sliced the HMS Curacoa in half, just cleanly.
Horrific.
Survivors described it as sounding like a thunderclap followed by the screaming of tearing metal, and then silence.
That is a horrific image.
It gets worse. Because of the standing orders, the ever-present threat of U-boats, the captain of the Queen Mary could not stop.
He couldn't stop.
If he stopped to rescue the survivors, he'd be a sitting duck. He would risk the 10,000-plus troops he had on board. So the Queen Mary steamed on.
They just left them.
They had to. The stern gunners on the Queen Mary reported watching the two halves of the Curacoa drift past in the wake, with hundreds of men in the freezing water, waving, screaming.
Oh, my God.
Over 300 men died.
300 men. And the thousands of troops on the decks of the Queen Mary just had to watch it happen.
That is a massive, collective trauma event imprinted on the vessel. When people talk about bad energy or hauntings, they're often reacting to the knowledge of that event. It changes how you see the ship. It's not just a hotel, it's a tomb, it's a crime scene.
And yet, despite that tragedy, the ship kept going. In 1943, it set the standing record for carrying 16,683 people on a single crossing.
A record that still stands for a floating vessel, by the way.
Incredible. So after the war, it went back to being a liner, but the jet age was coming. Flying became the thing to do.
Right. And by 1967, it was losing money hand over fist, so it retired to Long Beach. And this is where the legend of the haunting really takes over.
The source mentions a psychic prediction from the launch in 1934. Lady Mabel Fortescue Harrison.
A great name. What a name.
She predicted. The Queen Mary will know her greatest fame and popularity when she never sails another mile.
Which is spooky accurate, isn't it?
It's very accurate. Since it docked in Long Beach, something like 50 million people have visited it. That just dwarfs the number of passengers it ever carried at sea.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way. It became famous for being an immobile attraction. But let's unpack the specific ghost stories because the Museo del Mar source goes into some great detail on these.
Well, you have the woman in white.
Of course, every haunted location requires a woman in white. It's almost a zoning law.
It is, isn't it? She's seen in the Queen's Salon, the old first-class ballroom, dancing alone in the shadows, wearing a 1930s evening gown.
And see, that's a safe ghost. It's romantic. It's nostalgic. It reinforces the brand of the ship, the glamour, the golden age. It's not scary. It's atmospheric.
I see. It's good for business.
Exactly. But then you have the other stories, the ones that are tied to the machinery, to the labor, the working-class ghosts.
John Petter. The engine room. This one got under my skin because it's so visceral and so specific.
And this is a verified death. July 10th, 1966. John Petter was an 18-year-old crew member. The ship was nearing the end of its service. They were running a drill on the watertight doors.
These are the massive steel doors that seal off the ship if the hull is breached, right? like in Titanic.
Precisely. They are hydraulically operated, they weigh tons, and in 1966, they didn't have the laser safety sensors you see on elevator doors today.
No failsafe.
None. If they are closing, they're closing. And the legend says the crew used to dare each other, play chicken with the doors. And Petter tried to slip through door number 13 as it was sealing.
He tried to beat the door.
He was too slow. He was crushed instantly.
And now, the legends is that people see a figure in blue overalls tinkering in the shadows of what they call Shaft Alley. Or they hear knocking on the pipes. Unexplained sounds.
Right, but there is a specific anecdote in the source from 1991 that I find fascinating.
I think I know the one you're talking about. The grease stain.
The grease stain. A couple is touring the engine room. The husband feels a distinct brush against his cheek, like a hand. He assumes it's a cobweb or, just something in the air. But when they get into better light, his wife stops him and asks, "What is that on your face?"
And it was grease.
A smudge of black engine grease right on his cheek.
See, that gives me chills. Not the bangings or the sightings, but that.
Yes.
It's such a specific physical detail. It anchors the ghost story to the reality of the location. An engine room should have grease.
Exactly. It connects the haunting to the labor. It's not just a generic spirit. It's a worker. It's John Petter still at his post.
Then we have room B340, the most haunted room.
The premium haunted room.
Right, which was closed for years due to, and I'm quoting here, poltergeist activity.
And then coincidentally reopened in 2018 with a much higher price tag.
That feels like the marketing department getting involved.
Oh, absolutely. The source mentions guests reporting their covers being pulled off in the middle of the night or the water faucets turning on and off by themselves.
But we have to ask, if you book the haunted room and you pay extra for the haunted room, are you priming your brain to interpret every creak and groan of an 80-year-old ship as a ghost?
It's pure confirmation bias. You're looking for it. You want your money's worth.
Right. I paid for a haunting, I'm going to get a haunting.
But the Museo del Mar source brings up an interesting philosophical point about artifacts. They have a life ring from the Queen Mary in their museum in Puerto Rico.
A life ring.
Yeah. And they pose the question, can an object hold haunted energy?
This is the concept of psychometry, right? The idea that objects can record events or emotions.
Yes. The idea that intense emotion or trauma leaves a magnetic or energetic recording on physical matter. If you believe the Queen Mary is haunted because of the trauma of the Curaçao crash or John Petter's death, does a piece of that ship carry that charge if you move it 3,000 miles away?
That's a fascinating question. It suggests that the haunting isn't in the air. It's in the steel itself.
Which is a perfect transition to our next location. Because if we are talking about physical spaces created by trauma or perhaps creating trauma, we have to talk about the Winchester Mystery House.
The House of Myths, San Jose, California.
An absolute labyrinth of 160 rooms, staircases that hit ceilings, doors that open into empty air.
I remember hearing this story as a kid. It's classic Americana folklore. Sarah Winchester, the heiress to the rifle fortune.
The gun that won the West. A massive fortune built on a very deadly invention.
And the legend says she was crushed by guilt, that the spirits of everyone killed by a Winchester rifle were haunting her. So she goes to a medium in Boston.
As one does in the 19th century.
And the medium tells her, you must move west, and you must build a house, and you must never stop building. As long as the hammers are ringing, you will live. If they stop, you die.
That is the story we all know. It's the story they sell you on the tour. And it explains the chaos she was building to confuse the ghosts. She slept in a different room every night to hide from them. It creates this image of a terrified madwoman running from invisible demons.
It's a great story.
It's a fantastic story.
But then we read this SF Gate investigation, and it basically takes that story and just throws it out the window.
It's a total reality check. It's a complete demolition of the myth. And frankly, the reality makes Sarah Winchester seem like a much more interesting, capable, and rational person than the Mad Widow legend implies.
So let's bust some myths. First of all, the move to San Jose in 1884. The legend says she was fleeing ghosts in New Haven.
Right. But the reality, her husband, William, had just died of tuberculosis. They had lost their infant daughter years before to a childhood illness. She was grieving deeply. And she had family in the Bay Area. Her sister and brother-in-law lived there.
So she moved to be near her support system.
Exactly. That is a very human, very rational response to catastrophic loss. It's not about ghosts. It's about family.
Okay, so what about the constant building? The weird architecture, the stairs to nowhere, the doors that open onto a two-story drop.
This is the part I love. The SF Gate article points out something so simple that we often overlook. She didn't have an architect.
She was doing it herself.
She was an amateur. She had, for all practical purposes, unlimited money. Her income was roughly $1,000 a day. In 1890s money, that is an obscene amount of wealth.
It's staggering.
And she had ideas. She loved architecture. But she didn't have formal training in structural engineering or, blueprints.
So the weirdness isn't a ghost trap, it's a mistake.
It's a mistake or a change of mind. Imagine you are building a house in a video game, and you build a second floor, but then you decide to delete the staircase but forget to delete the door that led to it. That's what happened.
So the door to nowhere was just a door to a balcony she decided not to build.
Precisely. And there is a quote from a letter she wrote to her sister-in-law that really humanizes all of this. She writes, "My upper hall was rendered so unexpectedly dark by a little addition that after a number of people had missed their footing, I decided that safety demanded something to be done."
Unexpectedly dark. That sounds like someone who just added a wing and realized, oops, I blocked the sunlight from the main hallway.
Right. It's just bad design, not spiritual warfare.
Yeah.
She was experimenting. She was tearing things down and rebuilding them because she didn't like how they looked, not because a spirit told her to add another turret.
What about the legend that the hammers never stopped? That she had crews working 24/7 for 38 years?
The source material says that is completely false. It's a great image, but it's not true. She sent the workers home all the time. If it was a hot summer day in San Jose, she'd say, "Go home, it's too hot to work." If she was tired and didn't want the noise, "Take the week off, fellas."
So the central premise of the legend, that the hammers had to keep going or she would die, is demonstrably false.
Completely. Construction stopped and started constantly.
So if she wasn't crazy, and she wasn't running from ghosts, why did she keep building for so long? What was the driver?
This is where the story shifts from horror to history. And I think this is the most compelling part of the real story. We have to look at the panic of 1893.
The economic depression.
It was devastating, one of the worst in American history. Unemployment in the Santa Clara Valley, which was mostly agricultural then, hit something like 40%. People were starving.
And here is Sarah Winchester, the wealthiest woman in the valley.
The wealthiest by far. And historians now speculate, with a lot of evidence, that she kept building as a way to keep the local community employed.
So it was a jobs program, a form of philanthropy.
Essentially, yes. A one-woman stimulus package. She was keeping the carpenters, the tilers, the glaziers, the gardeners on the payroll when no one else was hiring. The logic was simple. I have this money. These men need work. I'll have them build another wing. It reframes her completely.
That is a huge shift. It turns the crazy lady trope on its head. She's not a victim of fear, but a benefactor.
She is. But society in the 1890s didn't know what to do with a wealthy, independent woman living alone. The media, specifically the San Francisco Chronicle, started writing these, hit pieces on her as early as 1895.
But the source says they weren't even talking about ghosts initially.
That's the fascinating part. The early rumors were that she was building to find the elixir of eternal youth, or that she was practicing alchemy. They just couldn't accept that she was just doing her own thing.
She was reclusive, she was female, and she was rich.
A trifecta. That made her a target for gossip. But the ghost story as we know it today, the one about the rifle victims, that was a marketing invention that came much, much later.
Enter John H. Brown,
the theme park designer. After Sarah died in her sleep in 1922, he leased the house. He and his wife Mamie are the ones who really pivoted to the supernatural angle to sell tickets.
They invented the seance room.
Right. Yep. The famous seance room, where she supposedly talked to the spirits every night. It was actually the gardener's quarters.
That's amazing.
It's pure marketing. Brown looked at this sprawling, confusing house and realized, I can't sell tickets to a house of bad amateur architecture, but I can sell tickets to a haunted house built by a madwoman.
And it worked. It's been working for 100 years. It has completely defined the legacy of the house.
It has. But what's interesting is looking at the Kuhom source, the architectural analysis, they actually praise the floor plan in a weird way.
Really? I just assumed it was an objective mess.
It is a mess structurally, but they call it creative home design. They point out that she utilized small spaces very effectively, and more importantly, she innovated for her own needs. She invented easy riser staircases.
Oh, I've seen photos of those. The steps that are only a couple of inches high.
Exactly. The steps are only 2 inches high. The legend says they were built to slow down ghosts who couldn't handle the strange rhythm. The reality: Sarah Winchester had terrible, debilitating arthritis.
So she built stairs she could actually use.
Of course, form follows function. Her function was comfort for an elderly woman with bad joints. The legend says stairs to confuse ghosts. The reality is stairs for arthritis.
I love that. The real story is so much more human. But we can't ignore the Reddit thread we have in the notes, because even with all this debunking, people want to believe.
Oh, they do. That thread is a perfect microcosm of the whole debate. You have the skeptics on one side saying, it's a tourist trap, the ghost tours are a recent addition for Halloween, it's all fake.
But then you have users like Queen of Cups.
Great username.
She claims to have a photo.
Right. She says she was there, snapped a picture of a random window, and later saw a figure in it. And then another user, Jayhawk444, argues against the idea that the story is new. They say, I went 30 years ago and the occult story was there then.
So they are using the longevity of the lie to prove the truth.
Exactly. It's this feedback loop. The marketing has been so effective for so long that it's become its own kind of historical fact for people.
It seems like with Winchester, the ghost story is a cover-up. It covers up the story of a woman trying to be an architect and a philanthropist in a world that just thought she should be a quiet, grieving widow.
I think that is a very astute observation. We prefer the crazy cat lady with ghosts story because it fits our stereotypes. The independent amateur architect saving her town from economic ruin story is harder to tell and maybe a little less exciting for a roadside attraction.
Speaking of cover-ups and the internet shaping the narrative, we need to move to our third location, and this one. This one feels different. It's not historical in the same way. It's modern. It's digital.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly tragic.
The Cecil Hotel.
Yeah.
And the death of Elisa Lam.
This is based on the book Gone at Midnight by Jake Anderson. Now, the Cecil already had a reputation, a very dark one, before 2013.
A very dark one. It was known as the Suicide Hotel. It's located near Skid Row in downtown Los Angeles. It has a heavy, violent history. It was a budget hotel that pretty quickly became a flop house.
It saw suicides, overdoses, murders.
And it housed serial killers. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, stayed there during his killing spree in the 80s. He'd come back covered in blood, and no one in the lobby would bat an eye. Jack Unterweger, an Austrian serial killer, stayed there and murdered prostitutes.
So the place itself, the container, already had this dark energy, this reputation.
It creates a priming effect. You walk in expecting darkness. But on January 31st, 2013, Elisa Lam checks in. She's a 21-year-old Canadian student. She's traveling the West Coast alone, blogging about her trip, and then she just disappears.
Initially, it's just a missing persons case. But the LAPD was dealing with something massive at the same time, the Christopher Dorner manhunt.
Right, the rogue ex-cop who declared war on the department. The entire LAPD force, all of Southern California law enforcement, was focused on that. So the Elisa Lam case didn't get the full spotlight immediately.
But then, to generate leads, the police released the video.
The elevator video.
I think this is one of the most watched, most analyzed pieces of footage on the internet.
It is seared into the cultural memory. It's 4 minutes of grainy surveillance footage. Elisa gets in the elevator. She presses all the buttons. The door doesn't close.
It just stays open.
Which is the first weird thing. So she peeks out. She looks around fearfully, like she's expecting someone. She darts back in and hides in the corner where the camera can't see her. Then she steps out into the hallway and makes these strange, fluid hand gestures.
So it looks like she's talking to someone, but there's no one there.
And because the police released it without any context, the internet took it and ran. This is what the source calls the rise of the web sleuths.
Everyone became a detective.
Or a ghost hunter.
Huh.
Or a conspiracy theorist. The theories exploded. Was it the elevator game? A Korean urban legend about using a specific elevator ritual to enter another dimension?
I remember that one.
Was she being stalked by a killer who was just off camera? Was she possessed by one of the hotel's many ghosts?
The source mentions Trisha Griffith and the Web Sleuth site. It really legitimized this idea of amateur detectives crowdsourcing a case. But while everyone online is analyzing pixels and talking about ghosts, the reality at the hotel was getting, well, physically repulsive.
This is the part that turns it from a mystery into a genuine horror movie. February 19th, 2013. 2 weeks after she vanished, guests start complaining to the front desk.
The water.
The water, low pressure, a weird sweet smell, a brownish red sludge coming out of the taps. Guests like Natalie Davis and Stephen Cott complained. They were brushing their teeth with this water, showering in it. Some even drank it.
That is absolute nightmare fuel.
Finally, the hotel sends a maintenance worker, Santiago Lopez, to the roof to check the cisterns, the 4 massive water tanks that supply the hotel.
He climbs up the ladder of the main tank.
He looks inside. The lid is open. And there is Elisa Lam floating face up, naked. Her clothes were submerged in the tank with her. She had been decomposing in the hotel's water supply for 2 weeks.
It is just devastating. And immediately, the discovery shifted the online conversation from mystery to conspiracy.
Because of the logistics. How does a small woman get up to the roof, the doors alarmed and locked? How does she climb a 10-foot tank? And the big one, how did she open the incredibly heavy lid by herself?
And crucially, how did she close it from the inside?
That was the detail that drove the internet insane. Early reports, incorrect reports, said the lid was closed when he found her. If the lid was closed, it had to be murder. You can't close a heavy lid from the inside while treading water.
But that was a reporting error, right? The source is clear on that.
It was a huge reporting error. Santiago Lopez, the maintenance worker, later clarified in court that the lid was open when he found her. But the correction never traveled as far or as fast as the initial error. The closed lid theory became a cornerstone of the conspiracy.
And the source also highlights this synchronicity here. The bizarre parallels to the horror movie Dark Water.
It is uncanny. Dark Water, a 2005 American movie, which was a remake of a Japanese original, features a mother and daughter who move into a creepy apartment building.
And there's bad water.
There's dark, sludgy water coming from the taps. They discover that a young girl had drowned in the rooftop water tank years before. The elevator scenes in the movie even look like the Cecil footage.
It's so similar that people refuse to believe it was a coincidence.
Humans are pattern-seeking machines. When we see a coincidence that huge, our brains reject chance. We say, it must be a ritual. It must be a copycat killer reenacting the movie. It has to mean something.
But what gets lost in all this talk of rituals and movies and elevator games?
Elisa, the human being. The source discusses this moral tension, the line between genuine concern and tragedy porn.
Right.
The media and the web sleuths sensationalized the mystery so much that they completely ignored the Occam's razor explanation, the simplest answer.
Which was her mental health.
Elisa Lam had been diagnosed with bipolar I disorder. It's a very serious condition that can involve episodes of psychosis, paranoia, and hallucinations.
And the toxicology report.
It showed she was taking her medication, but the levels suggested she might have been under-medicated or perhaps skipping doses, which can trigger a severe manic episode.
So if you watch the elevator video through the lens of a manic episode,
it explains everything. The paranoia, the hiding, the psychomotor agitation, that's the clinical term for those weird hand gestures. She wasn't casting a spell. She was likely talking to hallucinations. She wasn't playing a game. She was terrified and disoriented.
And the tank. Hiding in the tank makes sense if you are in a state of flight, of psychosis.
Exactly. If you believe you are being chased by invisible enemies, you run up, you get to the roof, you find a dark place to hide. She climbed into the tank for safety. Tragically, when she was in, the water level was too low for her to reach the opening to get back out. She was trapped, she drowned, or died of hypothermia.
It's just heartbreaking. It's a tragedy of mental illness, not a ghost story.
But the internet didn't want that answer. Mental illness is sad and complicated and, frankly, stigmatized. Government conspiracy or evil hotel is exciting. It's easier to consume as entertainment.
This brings us to the synthesis part of this deep dive. Let's try to connect the dots. Why do we need the ghosts? Why do we rewrite these stories into something supernatural?
Well, look at the pattern. Queen Mary, Winchester, Cecil. In all three cases, the ghost story serves a very specific function.
In two of them, the Queen Mary and Winchester, it's economic. It's about money.
It's the monetization of mystery. The Queen Mary is a hotel. It costs millions of dollars a year to maintain an old ship like that. They need the 50 million visitors. If it was just a history museum of 1930s logistics, would it survive? Probably not. They need the woman in white. They need John Petter.
And John Brown knew that about the Winchester House back in the 1920s. He knew he had to sell the spookiness to sell the ticket. The truth wasn't scary enough.
But with the Cecil, the hotel didn't want the publicity. They actually rebranded to Stay on Main to try and wash off the stigma. It didn't work. In that case, the ghost story serves a psychological function for us, the public.
It keeps us from looking at the sad, uncomfortable realities.
Exactly. And there is a crazy woman trope running through Winchester in the Elisa Lam case that is really telling.
How so?
With Sarah Winchester, we ignore her agency, her grief, her philanthropy, and we call her mad. With Elisa Lam, we ignore her documented illness and turn her into a paranormal mystery.
It strips them of their humanity. It turns them into NPCs, non-player characters in our entertainment.
It denies the reality of their internal lives. It is so much easier for us to say, ghosts did it, than to face the reality of profound grief, in Sarah's case, or the catastrophic failure of mental health support in Elisa's. Ghosts are a safe scare. We can turn them off. Real-world tragedy is harder to look at.
And then there is the architecture itself, the container, as you called it.
Yes. This is the psychogeography piece. All three stories rely on the environment to do the heavy lifting. The Queen Mary is made of steel and rivets. It's cold, industrial, claustrophobic. The engine room feels dangerous because it was dangerous. It was built for war.
And the Winchester house has the labyrinth, the endless hallways.
It takes away your ability to navigate. That triggers a primal anxiety. If you don't know where the exit is, your brain goes into high alert. You interpret that alertness as a spiritual presence, but really it's just spatial confusion.
The Cecil, the water tank, the broken elevator.
Confined spaces. We have a biological fear of being trapped and of contaminated water. The thought of being in that tank. It's a primal horror. We project that horror onto the supernatural because the physical reality is almost too much to process.
So what does this all mean? We started this mission to peel back the layers.
I think what we find is that skepticism isn't about being a buzzkill. It isn't just about saying ghost stories are fake.
Right, we aren't here to ruin the fun of Halloween or a good scary movie.
No. We are here to honor the truth. Because the truth in these cases is often so much more meaningful and more human. In the Winchester case, looking past the ghost story reveals a woman who was a job creator, an artist, and a survivor of immense personal tragedy.
And with the Queen Mary.
It forces us to remember the 300 men on the HMS Curacoa and the 18-year-old John Petter. The ghosts keep their names alive in a weird way, but the history tells us who they actually were. They weren't spooks, they were sailors, they were boys.
And with Elisa Lam. Looking past the conspiracy theories forces us to look at how we, as a society, treat mental health.
And how we consume true crime. It forces us to ask, am I trying to help solve a problem, or am I just watching a tragedy for entertainment? It's an important distinction.
It's a journey from the freezing Atlantic to a sunny orchard in San Jose to the gritty streets of LA. But really, it's a journey into how we tell stories.
And what those stories say about us. We build the ghosts that we need.
So here's a final thought for you to chew on. We talked about the woman in white and the gray ghost, but ask yourself this. If we strip away the ghosts, the curses, the elaborate conspiracy theories, if we take all the supernatural stuff off the table, are the real human stories? The war tragedy of the Queen Mary slicing through its escort, the grieving widow building a monument to her loneliness and her community, the lost student alone in the machinery of a city that didn't see her, are those real stories actually more haunting than the fiction?
I think they are. Because they could happen to any of us. That is the true horror, the vulnerability.
Look at the floor plans of your own beliefs, folks. We will see you on the next deep dive.
Stay curious.